No one dared speak a word to the millionaire until the new cleaning lady's daughter did something no adult had ever tried. James Santana ran Santana and Associates like a silent emperor, where every employee knew that unnecessary conversation meant immediate dismissal. In the corridors of the firm, housed in one of the most modern towers on Park Avenue, executives averted their eyes when he walked by. Assistants pretended to be far too busy to greet him, and even the lobby security guards straightened as if to attention when his black BMW rolled into the garage. The company occupied 5 entire floors of the most expensive commercial tower in Midtown, with panoramic views of the city stretching to the horizon. In the conference halls, furnished with Italian imports, directors broke into cold sweats whenever they had to present reports to James. "Mr. Santana, the quarter's numbers show 15% growth," the CFO, Charles Allen, would say, trying to keep his voice steady. "Very good," James replied, dryly. "Next topic." That was how it had worked for years. Short answers, quick decisions, zero tolerance for any conversation that wasn't strictly business. The staff had learned that trying to make small talk with James was a guaranteed recipe for embarrassment. In the penthouse on the Upper East Side, where he had lived alone for 8 years, the rules were even stricter. The residence, about 5,400 square feet, took up the entire top floor of a luxury building with a private terrace offering a 360-degree view of Manhattan. Mary Constance, his 52-year-old housekeeper, originally from Georgia, had learned over 6 years that communication with her employer was limited to the essentials. "Good morning, Mr. Santana," she said every day at 7 a.m. sharp, receiving only a silent nod in reply. "Your coffee is served on the terrace." James never answered verbally. A tilt of the head was all the communication he offered, even to the woman who kept his life orderly and his home immaculate. Mary knew his every preference: a double espresso with no sugar, lightly browned French toast, and fresh squeezed orange juice without pulp. She prepared everything with military precision, left it on the terrace table, and withdrew without a sound. It was Monday, June 3rd, when everything began to change. "Mr. Santana, the new cleaning lady has arrived," Mary announced in the respectful tone she always used. "She brought her little girl, as you authorized." James lifted his eyes from the financial reports in his study, mildly irritated. Children were unnecessary complications in his perfectly organized routine, but the woman had begged during the interview the previous week. "Please, sir," she had said, almost in tears. "I have no one to watch my daughter. The daycare closed, and I really need this job. Against his better judgment, he had agreed, provided the child didn't cause any disturbance. Keep her quiet had been his only condition. Rose Silver stepped into the apartment, holding tightly to the hand of Isabella, 5 years old. The 32-year-old, a resident of Mott Haven in the South Bronx, wore an expression of barely concealed nervousness as her eyes swept the flawless decor around her. The Italian marble floor reflected the natural light pouring through floor-to-ceiling windows. Every piece of furniture had been chosen by a celebrated designer, and the artwork on the walls cost more than every house on her block combined. The apartment's look was modern and cool, with shades of gray, white, and black dominating every room. "My God," Rose murmured under her breath, trying not to show her shock at so much wealth concentrated in one place. She had worked in upper-middle-class homes before, but never anything of this magnitude. "Be very quiet, sweetheart," she whispered to Isabella, crouching to her daughter's eye level. "Remember what we talked about on the bus and subway the whole way here? The gentleman who owns this home is very important, very busy, and he doesn't like noise. You have to be like a sleeping bird, very, very quiet." The ride had taken nearly 2 hours from the South Bronx to the Upper East Side, and Rose had used the time to explain in detail how her daughter should behave. "Mommy's going to work in a very beautiful home, but the owner doesn't like kids making a mess," she'd explained. "If you behave really well, at the end of the month we'll be able to buy those colored pencils you want." Isabella nodded with the seriousness of a tiny adult, her large brown eyes absorbing every detail of a world that felt like a movie. She wore a simple, clean, well-kept light blue dress Rose had bought on clearance in the garment district and ironed 3 times the night before, wanting her daughter to look presentable on the first day. In her small hands, the girl held a worn cloth doll with fraying yarn hair and one slightly loose button eye, her most precious treasure. The doll had been a Christmas gift from Miss Eunice, the only neighbor who had bothered to give the child anything the previous year. "This is so pretty, Mommy," Isabella said in a whisper, gazing up at the Austrian crystal chandelier that hung above the entry hall. It was an imported piece that had cost more than $10,000, but to Isabella it was simply something bright and beautiful that captured her attention. "Very pretty, honey, but remember the rules." "Only look. Never touch anything," Rose said, tying on the clean apron she'd brought in a plastic bag, along with cleaning supplies bought with money borrowed from her sister. Mary Constance appeared to walk her through the home's strict routine. "We always start cleaning in the main living room," she explained, motioning down the broad corridor lined with pricey abstract paintings. "Then the dining room, the kitchen, the guest rooms, and last the upstairs level, where Mr. Santana's bedroom is." She paused and lowered her voice. "Mr. Santana works in his office from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., so you must never disturb him. He doesn't like chatter, he doesn't like noise, and above all, he doesn't like interruptions." Mary knew her employer's temperament well and understood that any misstep could result in immediate dismissal. "If he comes out of the office, you stop what you're doing and stay quiet until he passes." For the first 2 weeks, the routine ran like a Swiss watch. Rose cleaned each room with an efficiency that impressed even Mary, who had worked with many housekeepers over the years. "Rose, you work very well," Mary said one morning. "Mr. Santana hasn't complained once, which is a good sign." It was true. In the 2 weeks since Rose had started, James hadn't summoned Mary even once to complain, a rarity for someone as demanding as he was. Isabella, for her part, had found a special little corner next to the bookshelf in the main living room, where she played quietly with her cloth doll. She invented stories in a whisper only she could hear, spinning whole dialogues and using different voices for each imaginary character. "Ms. Clara is going for a walk in the garden today," she whispered to the doll, giving it the name she had chosen. "But she has to be careful not to dirty her pretty dress." With the boundless creativity of children, the girl built entire worlds, turning that room's corner into a little town where her doll lived out fantastic adventures. James remained locked in his bullet-resistant glass office, pretending not to notice the feminine presence that had invaded his sanctuary of solitude. The office was his refuge, with glass walls that let him see the whole main room without being clearly seen himself. He had designed the space specifically to maintain visual control over everything in his home. But there was something different in the air since Rose and Isabella had arrived. The apartment, once as silent as a tomb, now pulsed softly with life between its marble and glass. Occasionally, despite his efforts to focus on numbers and reports, he overheard fragments of the mother-daughter whispers. "Mommy, can I help you clean this pretty table?" Isabella asked one morning, pointing at the tempered glass coffee table. "You're already helping me by being well-behaved and obedient," Rose replied, with a tenderness James hadn't heard in years. "When we get home tonight, you can help me fold your clothes and put your toys away." It was an ordinary conversation, common between mother and child, yet it sounded alien in an environment where only orders and monosyllabic answers used to echo. In the third week, something unexpected happened. James had stepped out of his office to get a glass of cold water in the kitchen when he found Isabella standing before the giant aquarium that covered an entire living room wall. The saltwater tank, imported from Japan, held rare tropical fish that had cost a fortune. It was one of his few concessions to pure visual beauty, though he rarely stopped to admire it. The girl stood on tiptoe, her tiny hands resting on the thick glass, watching with fascination as the colorful fish swam among artificial corals and aquatic plants. "How beautiful," she murmured to herself, unaware she was being watched. "They look like jewels swimming in the water." A golden angelfish glided right past her, and Isabella giggled softly, delighted by the sight. "Hi, pretty fish," she whispered. "You live in a lovely house, just like my uncle here." For a moment that felt like forever, James stood there, watching. There was something in the purity of it, in the way a child appreciated beauty without thinking about price or value, that stirred a part of him long dormant in his hardened chest. It was a distant memory of his own childhood, when he'd press his face to the window of the fish store in downtown Newark, where he had grown up. His father, a simple man who worked at a textile mill, took him downtown every Saturday, and they always stopped in front of the pet shop, Golden Aquarium. "One day you'll have beautiful fish like these, son," his father would say. "When you grow up and work hard, you'll be able to buy anything you want." The memory brought a stab of pain. His father had died of a heart attack at 52, working double shifts to pay for his son's business school tuition. He never lived to see James reach the success he had dreamed of for him. The Thursday that would change everything forever started like every other day of the last 15 years. James woke at 6 a.m., did 45 minutes on the treadmill in the private gym on the terrace, took a cold shower, put on one of his 30 identical suits, and went to his office to review contracts. At 9 a.m., he joined a video conference with American investors. At 10:30 a.m., he signed documents for the acquisition of a smaller insurance company in Pennsylvania. At noon, he ate lunch alone on the terrace, while reading reports on his tablet. It was a routine that had worked for years, predictable and efficient. At 2:40 p.m., the phone rang. The number on the screen was familiar. The office of Dr. Henry Moore, the renowned cardiologist who had been treating him for 5 years. James had completed a full slate of tests the previous week, routine exams he did annually at his doctor's insistence. But this time Dr. Moore had ordered a few more, concerned about the chest pains James had been feeling on and off. "James, I need to speak with you urgently about your test results," the doctor said, his voice unusually serious. James felt his stomach clench. "Can you come to the office today?" "I have some openings after 4 p.m. Dr. Moore was known for his objectivity. He never wasted time on needless formalities, so the urgency in his voice was unsettling. "Just tell me, Henry," James snapped, drumming his fingers on the solid mahogany desk. "I don't have time for mysteries, or to sprint across town at this hour. Tell me what pill I need to take and let's be done." He was used to solving problems quickly, and health problems, in his mind, were no different from business problems. The silence on the other end stretched for seconds that felt like hours before the reply that shattered his life. "Your heart is failing, James. The tests show advanced dilated cardiomyopathy. The damage is extensive and, unfortunately, irreversible. We need to discuss treatment options immediately, including the possibility of a heart transplant. But I want to be completely honest. The situation is extremely serious. We're talking months, not years," the doctor paused. "James, you need to understand the gravity. Your heart is functioning at only 20% of normal capacity. When he hung up, his hands trembled uncontrollably. James felt as if the floor had opened beneath him and he were falling into a bottomless pit. At 41, the man who controlled an insurance empire with annual revenue in the millions of dollars had just discovered that his own life carried no policy to protect it. All his wealth, all the contracts he had signed, all the carefully planned investments, none of it mattered against the brutal reality of a heart that was giving out. The office walls seemed to close in as the truth settled like a crushing weight on his already aching chest. His mind, always so organized and rational, plunged into total panic at the prospect of mortality. All the carefully constructed plans for the next 10 years, all the financial targets, all the expansion projects, everything had become irrelevant in the face of a devastating medical prognosis. For the first time in decades, his defenses shattered completely. The tears came without warning, silent at first, then in uncontrollable waves he couldn't stop, despite all his willpower. All the relationships he had sacrificed for success, all the chances at happiness he had thrown away for money and power, all the nights he had chosen to stay in the office instead of living his life, all the girlfriends he had pushed away as distractions, everything surfaced at once. He remembered Carla, the last woman he had truly loved, who had left 8 years earlier after an ultimatum. "Choose, James. Either you learn to be human again, or I'm gone for good." He had chosen work. He always chose work. He staggered out of the office like a wounded man, with no destination, only a primitive instinct to seek some kind of comfort in the middle of the despair consuming him like fire. The hallway he knew, like the back of his hand, felt strange and hostile. The walls seemed to throb to the rhythm of his sick heart, and each step echoed in his ears. He didn't know where he was going. He just walked, trying to outrun the reality that had seized his mind. The apartment that had always been his refuge now felt like a gilded prison where he was condemned to die alone. He sat down on the floor with his back against the wall of the corridor. That was when he saw her. Isabella stood in the middle of the main corridor, without the cloth doll she always carried, without the improvised toys she used to entertain herself. Just the child, 5 years old, watching him with enormous brown eyes that seemed to see through every mask he used to hide his humanity. She had stopped playing when she heard his heavy, uneven footsteps in the hall, and now watched him with an expression that mixed curiosity and concern. There was an old wisdom in those young eyes, as if she could feel the pain he carried, even without fully understanding what was happening. The girl approached slowly, with the instinctive gentleness of someone approaching a wounded animal. No rush, no fear, moved only by a natural compassion that adults lose over time. Her little footsteps were silent on the cold marble, and she moved with a soft determination that didn't match her age. Without asking what was wrong, without trying to grasp the reasons for the tears sliding down his face, without hesitating for a single second, she raised her small, delicate hand, soft as a rose petal, with a tenderness James had completely forgotten existed in the world. With the sweetness he hadn't felt since his mother's arms in childhood, Isabella touched his tear-wet face and with gentle motions, like an angel sent for that exact moment, carefully wiped away each salty drop running over features hardened by years of self-imposed coldness. The gesture was made in total silence, but it spoke louder than any words ever could, conveying an unconditional love he hadn't received in decades. It was the kind of pure care that exists only between people who genuinely care for one another. No hidden agendas, no quid pro quo, right there in a corridor, usually haunted by the echoes of solitude. She treated James Santana like a regular human being, someone who needed affection, who deserved compassion, who had the right to cry without judgment or professional consequences. Uncle James, why are you crying? He had no time to breathe before another voice called from the other end of the hall. Isabella, come here right now. It was Rose, who had rushed in from the kitchen when she realized her daughter was no longer in her usual corner by the bookshelf. When she took in the scene, her face went completely pale, as if she had seen a ghost. Her little girl stood in front of the most powerful man she knew, tiny hands touching his face while he cried like a lost child. The tears ran down James's cheeks without any shame, something Rose had never imagined she could witness. The man everyone feared stood utterly vulnerable before a 5-year-old. I'm so sorry, Mr. Santana. I'm so sorry, Rose cried, hurrying forward, her quick steps echoing on the marble, her heart hammered with nerves and fear. In her mind, this could only mean immediate dismissal, and maybe worse. She shouldn't be bothering you. I told her to stay quiet. Come here, Isabella, now. Her voice shook as she reached to pull her daughter away from what looked like an imminent disaster. But something completely unexpected happened. James raised his right hand in a firm gesture that froze Rose in the middle of the corridor. His eyes were red and swollen from crying, but something was different in them now. A humanity no one had ever seen before on that typically expressionless face. No, he said, hoarse and choked. She isn't bothering me, quite the opposite. Rose went completely still, unsure how to react to a situation that didn't fit any script she knew. Her eyes flicked between her boss and her child, trying to understand what was happening in a universe where the rules seemed to have been suspended. The most intimidating man she knew was crying in front of her daughter, and instead of being irritated or embarrassed, he looked almost grateful for the girl's presence. It was as if the world had flipped upside down before her eyes. Uncle James is sad, Isabella said, turning to her mother with the absolute naturalness of children when they explain what adults consider complicated. Her small, clear voice cut the tension like a soft flute inside a heavy symphony. I wiped his tears, like you do for me when I cry after I fall off my bike. The crystal clarity of that explanation moved something deep inside James's wounded chest. How long had it been since anyone had truly cared about his tears? How long since anyone had offered comfort without expecting anything in return? How long since anyone had treated him simply as a human being who needed care? Thank you, he murmured, his voice a rough whisper laden with emotion. Slowly, as if each movement cost immense effort, he straightened to Isabella's height, his knees touching the cold marble. Thank you for helping me, Isabella. It was the first time in countless years he had thanked someone for anything unrelated to work, deals, contracts, or approved reports. It was a thank you that came straight from the heart, without corporate filters or procedural formality. At that exact moment, Mary Constance appeared in the corridor, drawn by the unusual stir breaking the home's customary silence, and she nearly dropped the silver tray of documents she was carrying when she saw the extraordinary scene. James Santana, whom she had known for 6 years as a block of ice, who never showed any emotion, knelt on the Italian marble floor, talking to a 5-year-old, his eyes still bright and wet with fresh tears. The image was so surreal that she had to blink several times to make sure she wasn't dreaming. Mr. Santana, she managed after a few seconds of absolute shock, her voice higher than usual. Are you all right? Do you need anything? Should I call a doctor? Her hands trembled slightly as she gripped the tray, her mind struggling to process the radical transformation that had overtaken her employer in a matter of minutes. James rose slowly, like a man carrying an invisible weight on his back, trying to recover at least part of the composure he had completely lost. I'm fine, Mary, he answered, though his voice was still unsteady and full of feeling. I just received some very difficult news today. Isabella tugged gently at the hem of his trousers with her tiny fingers, making him look down again with a mix of surprise and tenderness. My mum always says, when we are really sad, it's good to talk to someone who cares about us, she said, with absolute seriousness, offering important advice born of life experience. She says keeping sadness only in your tummy makes your tummy hurt. You can talk to me if you want, Uncle James. The offer, from a child he barely knew, who had met him for the first time minutes earlier, touched James in a way he couldn't explain or fully understand. There was a purity in it that contrasted sharply with the calculated, interest-driven interactions of the corporate world. "And what do you like to talk about, Isabella?" he asked, surprising himself by asking a genuinely personal question, something he hadn't done in decades. His voice had taken on a different tone, softer, almost paternal, a voice he barely recognized as his own. "I like to talk about the pretty fish that swim in your big aquarium," she answered immediately, her eyes lighting with excitement as she pointed toward the giant tank that took up a whole wall. "And my doll Clara, she's my best friend, and the birds I see flying by our window early in the morning, and when Mommy tells me beautiful stories before I go to sleep." Each topic came with a genuine enthusiasm that made her eyes shine like little stars. Rose watched the conversation in complete shock, like someone witnessing a miracle in slow motion. The most intimidating boss she had ever known was actually talking to her 5-year-old, asking personal questions, showing genuine interest in the answers, treating the girl like someone whose opinions and likes truly mattered. It was like watching a personality transform in real time, something that challenged everything she thought she knew about human nature and about wealthy, powerful people. "Mr. Santana," Rose said, hesitantly, her voice low and careful, like someone walking on eggshells. "If you want us to leave early today, I completely understand. We don't have to finish cleaning. I can come back tomorrow and wrap everything up." She was offering a diplomatic exit for everyone, a way to end the strange situation without embarrassment. But James shook his head firmly, his expression almost pleading. "You don't need to go. In fact," he paused for a long beat, as if weighing every word and its consequences, "I would very much like you to stay a little longer today." If it isn't a problem for you, it was unmistakably a request, not an order. Rose had never heard James Santana make a request to anyone. "Do you want to see my doll, Clara?" Isabella asked, suddenly excited, already pattering off to fetch her treasure from the corner of the living room where she kept her few belongings. When she returned seconds later, she held out the worn cloth doll to James with a proud smile that lit her entire face. "Her name is Clara because it's a pretty name like she is, and she's very, very good. She never complains and always listens when I'm sad. Sometimes she gets sad too. Then I hug her tight and tell secrets in her ear, and she gets better." James took the doll carefully in his large hands calloused by work, as if he were holding something fragile and precious. The toy was clearly used, with hand-sewn patches in different threads, but it had been tended with so much care and love over the years that it practically radiated affection and stories. "She really is very beautiful," he said sincerely, studying the details with genuine attention. "May I hold her for a moment?" I promised to be very gentle. "You can, Uncle James," Isabella replied generously, with a seriousness that revealed how important the moment was to her. "But be careful not to squeeze too hard. She's delicate because she's old. Ms. Eunice gave her to me last Christmas when she saw I hadn't gotten any present." The story behind the doll touched James more deeply than he expected, reminding him of his own childhood, when gifts were rare and every toy was a treasure. Mary Constance continued to watch the whole scene as if witnessing something supernatural, something that defied every law of physics and logic she knew. In 6 long years of working daily for James Santana, keeping his house and organizing his life, she had never seen him show genuine interest in anything that wasn't directly linked to work, deals, contracts, or investments. Now he was literally sitting on the cold marble floor, holding a patched cloth doll with great care, and talking seriously with a 5-year-old about birds, bedtime stories, and colorful fish. "Mr. Santana," she said cautiously, her voice warm with motherly concern, "you haven't eaten a single thing since breakfast. It's almost 4 in the afternoon. May I prepare a snack, or at least a sandwich?" James looked at her as if coming slowly back to reality after a deep dream, his eyes still a little lost. "I'm not hungry, Mary, but thank you very much for your concern." It was the first time in all those years he had thanked her for something as simple and human as caring about whether he ate, and the housekeeper felt a lump rise in her throat. Rose stepped closer, hesitant, her careful footsteps echoing softly down the hall. "Isabella, don't bother Mr. Santana with kid things. He has important matters to handle." But James interrupted at once, raising a gentle hand. "She isn't bothering me at all. In fact, this is the most interesting and honest conversation I've had in years." The brutal honesty of the statement surprised even him, forcing him to confront the empty reality of his social interactions lately. "Do you work a lot, Uncle James?" Isabella asked, tilting her head with genuine curiosity, her brown curls swaying. "Mommy told me you're very busy and very important, and you have to take care of lots of things." "I do work, Isabella," he answered in a reflective tone he rarely used. "I work a lot, maybe too much." It was a deep admission he had never spoken out loud to anyone, not even to himself during sleepless nights in his office. "My neighbor, Mr. John, worked all the time too," Isabella said thoughtfully, her expression turning serious. "He left very early and came back when it was already dark. He never had time to play with his little grandkids when they visited. Then one day he got very sick and had to go live in the sky with Jesus. Mommy told me he was very sad because he didn't get to play with his grandkids before he made the trip to the sky." The child's innocent observation hit James like a punch to the gut, knocking the breath out of him. That was exactly what was happening with his own life. He had worked so much, closed himself off so completely, rejected every chance for human connection so systematically that now he was ill and utterly alone, without a small hand to hold, without grandchildren to play with, without beautiful stories to tell or hear. The prospect of a lonely death suddenly felt more real and terrifying than the medical diagnosis itself. "Isabella is right," Rose said softly, surprising everyone by joining in for the first time since she had arrived. "Sorry to speak so plainly, Mr. Santana, but sometimes we have to slow down a little just to really live." It was the first time she had expressed a personal opinion in his presence, but something in his complete vulnerability made her feel she could be honest without fear of reprisal. "I also work every day to support Isabella by myself, but I always stop to be with her and listen to what she wants to tell me. She's the one who gives me the strength to keep going." James looked at mother and daughter with new eyes, seeing for the first time the deep, true connection between them, an invisible thread of love stronger than any financial hardship. It was something he had lost long ago, perhaps decades, the fundamental ability to connect deeply with another human being, to form bonds beyond mutual convenience or business interests. "What do you do together when you get home after a day of work?" he asked, genuinely curious about a domestic routine he hadn't had in years. "We make dinner together in our little kitchen," Isabella said with enthusiasm, her eyes shining as she described her favorite routine. I help Mommy cut carrots and tomatoes with the little kid-safe knife that doesn't really cut. Then we sit on the old couch and watch cartoons. And before I go to sleep, Mommy always tells me a beautiful story just for me. What kind of story does your mom tell? He asked, fully absorbed by the description of a simple life rich in affection. Stories about a brave princess who saves the kingdom, about a nice dragon who becomes friends with the kids, and about a little bird who helps everyone who is sad, the girl said, counting them off on her fingers. Mommy makes them all up on the spot. She's really, really good at inventing beautiful things. Rose smiled shyly, blushing at her daughter's praise. I always liked telling stories. When I was a kid down in Mississippi, I told them to my younger brothers before they fell asleep. My mom worked the night shift at a factory, so I was the one who took care of everyone. Mary Constance, who had stayed for the entire extraordinary conversation, listening with growing amazement, finally spoke. Mr. Santana, would you like me to prepare a calming tea? I have fresh chamomile in the pantry. It was her discreet and caring way of offering exactly the comfort Isabella had mentioned. James looked at her with a genuine gratitude she had never seen in his eyes before. That would be wonderful, Mary. Thank you, truly. He paused, glancing at the three females around him. And please, make tea for all of us. I'd like you to stay and have tea with me, if it isn't a bother. The request was so unusual that it left all of them momentarily speechless. Can I show you all the fish while Miss Mary makes the tea? Isabella asked, taking James's big hand with the effortless naturalness of a child who already considered him a dear friend. I know the name of each one, and which are the prettiest. James stood slowly, still holding the girl's small, impossibly warm hand, feeling a vital energy he hadn't felt in years. You really know all their names? He asked, genuinely impressed. How did you learn? I asked Mommy first, but she didn't know, Isabella explained patiently. Then I asked Miss Mary, and she told me there's a big book of colorful fish on your shelf. She pointed to Mary with a grateful smile. She was very nice and showed me all the pictures, and I memorized the names because I love learning new things. Mary flushed slightly. She's an incredibly bright little girl, Mr. Santana. She asks smart questions about absolutely everything she sees for the first time. Isabella's confident little hand in his, the simple prospect of homemade tea with people who genuinely cared about him as a human being, the pure simplicity of learning about tropical fish through a child's curious eyes. For the first time since receiving the devastating diagnosis, a few hours earlier, he wasn't obsessing about death. He was thinking about life, about the real possibility that there might still be time for what truly mattered, even if it was only a little time. That one, swimming near the pink coral, is a golden angelfish, Isabella said with authority, pointing precisely to an elegant fish gliding between the artificial corals. And that tiny one with blue and white stripes is a clownfish. He's really funny, just like Nemo from the movie I watched at Miss Eunice's place. James watched with new eyes. Uncle James, Isabella said suddenly, looking him straight in the eyes with the particular seriousness children have when they ask important questions. Are you going to get better from the big sadness that made you cry? The question was simple in form, but packed with deep concern, and it made James's sick heart tighten painfully. How could he explain to an innocent child that his sadness had a name, premature death, and a medical timeline? I'm going to try very hard to get better, Isabella, he replied with all the honesty he could gather. Sometimes grown-ups need help from special people to get better from very deep sadness. Then I can help you get better, she said, with absolute, unshakable childhood confidence, as if she had just solved a complex problem. I've already learned lots of important things. I know how to wipe tears without hurting. I know how to tell stories about pretty fish. I know how to give warm hugs that make everything better, and I know how to stay close when people need company. Before he could answer, footsteps approached down the main corridor. Mary returned from the kitchen carrying a silver tray with the full tea service, her best porcelain cups, and a platter of honey cookies she had baked the day before. The gentle aroma of chamomile drifted through the air like an invisible embrace, bringing a sense of welcome the apartment hadn't known in years. "The tea is ready," she announced softly, setting the tray on the coffee table in the main living room. "I brought some honey cookies I made yesterday." James watched with a strange feeling in his chest. When had anyone last made tea, especially for him, not as part of office protocol, but as a genuine gesture of care? Isabella let go of his hand and ran to the table, her eyes widening at the delicate cups decorated with tiny hand-painted flowers. "They're so pretty," she exclaimed, but kept her hands carefully behind her back. "May I touch them?" The question showed how well she had learned to respect beautiful, expensive things that weren't hers. "Of course you may," James said, surprising himself. "In fact, I'd like you to choose a cup for yourself." The offer made her eyes sparkle like stars. She examined each cup carefully, touching them lightly with her fingertips. "This one has little flowers like the ones in Miss Eunice's yard," she said, picking a cup with delicate violets painted on the porcelain. Rose watched her daughter handle objects that were probably worth more than her monthly salary, but something in James's expression reassured her. He showed no worry about breaking or damage, only a soft smile that transformed his face. Mary served the tea ceremoniously, filling each cup with the golden liquid that perfumed the room. "Careful, it's warm," she told Isabella. "Blow on it first." The girl followed the instruction, sending delicate ripples across the surface. "It smells like the flowers in the garden," she said, enchanted. "Mommy, did you try it?" "This tea reminds me of my childhood," James said, unexpectedly, taking a cookie. "My mom made chamomile when I got sick. She said it was the most powerful medicine in the world. It was the first personal memory he'd shared with anyone in years." "Then your mother was like mine," Rose replied softly. "She always said there wasn't an illness that tea with love couldn't help." "Where is she now?" Isabella asked with childlike curiosity. "Does your mom still make tea for you when you're sick?" "She died 10 years ago," he said, his voice dropping. "Cancer. I was very busy with work back then. I didn't spend enough time with her. The silence that followed was heavy, laden with regret and missed chances." With the instinctive wisdom of children, Isabella got up from her armchair and walked to him. "She must be proud of you in heaven," she said simply, placing her small hand on his arm. "Mommy always says mums are happy when they see their kids being kind to other people." James felt his eyes fill again. The child's simplicity touched wounds he hadn't known, still bled. "Thank you, Isabella. That means a lot to me." Mary, who had known James's mother, spoke gently. "Ms. Helen was a wonderful lady, Mr. Santana. She always talked about you with great pride. She said she had raised a hard-working, honest son." "But not a present son," James murmured bitterly. "Not a son who knew how to value time with her." "What matters is what you do from now on," Rose said, surprisingly firm. "My grandmother always said we can't change the past, but we can make the present count." Her words carried the weight of someone who had faced hard losses and choices. Back in her armchair, Isabella still watched James with special attention. "Uncle James, do you have other relatives? Brothers? Cousins? Uncles?" The question showed her childlike attempt to map his family, to find people who could care for him. "I have no one," he answered honestly. "I always thought I didn't need a family." I believed work and money were enough. Everybody needs a family, Isabella declared with absolute conviction. If you don't have one, you can choose one. Mommy told me Ms. Eunice became our chosen family because she takes care of us, and we take care of her. The idea of a chosen family was completely new to James. In his world of contracts and deals, relationships were transactional, built on clearly defined mutual benefits. How does a chosen family work? He asked, genuinely curious. Easy, Isabella said, taking another cookie. You pick good people who really like you, and you like them too. Then you take care of each other just like a blood family. And how do you know if someone really likes you? He asked, revealing how far he'd drifted from basic human relationships. When the person is happy just to see you, she explained patiently. And when you're sad, they get sad too. And when you need help, they help you, even if it's hard. Rose watched her daughter explain love and loyalty to a man with millions who was learning about emotional wealth from a 5-year-old. Isabella's right, she added. Real family is who stays by your side in hard times, not just good ones. Mary, who had remained quiet, finally spoke. Mr. Santana, if I may, you've always had people who cared about you. You just never let them get close. You're right, Mary, James admitted. I built walls so high I couldn't even see who was on the other side trying to reach me. Isabella finished her tea and set the cup carefully back on the saucer. Uncle James, can I ask an important question? He nodded, bracing for another penetrating observation. Are you really sick? Is that why you were crying? The direct question caught him off guard. How do you explain a terminal diagnosis to a child without scaring her? I am sick, Isabella, he said, but the doctors are trying to help me get better. It wasn't a lie, just a simplified version of a brutal truth. When I get sick, Mommy stays with me the whole time until I get better, Isabella said thoughtfully. Who's going to stay with you? The question rang through the room like a funeral bell. James realized he had no one, no close friend, no family, no one who cared enough to sit by a hospital bed. I don't know, he admitted. Maybe I'll have to face this alone. You don't have to, Isabella said, determined. If you want, we can be your chosen family, me, Mommy, and Ms. Mary. Then you won't be alone when you're sick. The offer made him smile sadly. A loyal housekeeper, a hard-working cleaner, and a wise child were offering exactly what his money had never been able to buy: unconditional love and genuine presence. Would you really do that for me? He asked, voice thick with emotion. Even though I'm a stranger you barely know. You're not a stranger anymore, Isabella declared. You let me pick a pretty teacup, you listened to my fish stories, and you cried in front of me. That's what friends do. Rose stepped closer and laid a gentle hand on his shoulder. Mr. Santana, we all need care sometimes. You were generous with us today. You treated us like we mattered. It's only natural we want to return that kindness. Mary nodded vigorously. In all these years working here, today was the first time I've seen you truly happy. If we can help keep that going, it will be an honor. James looked around the room, seeing for the first time not the expensive objects he had amassed, but the precious people surrounding him. I don't know how to thank you, he whispered. You're offering me something I didn't know I needed this much. You don't have to thank us, Isabella said, standing to hug him. Family doesn't thank family. Family just takes care and sticks together. Then it's decided, Mary announced with a smile that lit the room. From today on, we're a family. A different kind, but a real family. Rose smiled through tears shimmering in her eyes. The best family is the one we choose with our hearts, not the one we get by chance. And so, on a Thursday afternoon, Drinking chamomile from porcelain cups, James Santana discovered that the greatest fortune in the world wasn't measured in money, but in people willing to wipe your tears without asking questions. "Now that we're family," Isabella said excitedly, "will you teach me about the important business things you do? And I can teach you more about fish and beautiful stories." What came next was the one thing no one expected. James's phone rang at the exact moment Isabella made her proposal of mutual lessons, breaking the warm atmosphere that had settled among them. The metallic sound echoed across the room like an unwelcome intruder, and everyone looked at the device buzzing insistently on the coffee table beside the tea tray. James glanced at the screen and visibly tightened. Dr. Henry Moore again, probably calling to insist he come to the office immediately to discuss treatment. "Excuse me," he said, picking up the phone with slightly trembling hands. "I need to take this." Instead of stepping away for privacy as he always did, he remained right there, in the presence of his new family. "James, you need to come to my office now," the doctor's voice said, urgent and worried. "We can't put this off. Your condition is more serious than you realize, and every hour counts." James closed his eyes, feeling the weight of medical reality press down on the happiness he had just discovered. "Dr. Moore, I understand the gravity, but I'm in the middle of something important at home. Can I come tomorrow morning?" The reply was quick and inflexible. "James, you're not understanding. We're talking weeks, not months. I need to explain the options we still have, and there aren't many. Every day without a concrete start reduces your chances." Isabella, with a child's sharp sensitivity, realized immediately that something was wrong. She moved closer as he spoke, laying her tiny hand on his knee in a quiet gesture of support. Rose and Mary exchanged worried looks, catching enough fragments to sense the true severity of his situation. "All right, Dr. Moore," James said at last, his voice heavy with resignation. "I'll be there in an hour." When he hung up, the silence was almost palpable, loaded with a tension that hadn't existed a few minutes earlier. "Uncle James," Isabella said softly, "the doctor said you're really very sick, didn't he?" Her small voice sliced through the quiet like a sad flute, revealing that she had understood much more than any adult might expect. James looked at her, at those huge brown eyes full of genuine concern, and felt he could no longer hide the truth from people who had offered to be his family. "Yes, Isabella. I'm very sick, my heart isn't working right, and the doctors aren't sure they can help me get better." The brutal honesty of his words echoed like a death sentence, making Rose raise her hand to her mouth in shock. Mary stepped close immediately, her maternal instincts fully engaged. "Mr. Santana, you won't face this alone." "Not while we're here." Her voice was firm, laden with a determination that surprised even her. "If you'll allow it, I'd like to go with you to the doctor today." The offer moved James deeply. How many years had he faced everything alone, too proud to accept help? "I want to go too," Isabella declared, and the adult smiled despite the gravity. Rose knelt by her daughter. "Sweetheart, a doctor's office isn't really a place for children. We can wait for them to come back and make a special dinner." "No," James said unexpectedly, making them all look up. "I want Isabella to come with me. If she wants to be part of this family, she should be present in the hard moments too." He swallowed, his voice catching slightly. "And honestly, I think I'll need her courage." The decision to take a child to a medical appointment broke every conventional rule of what was appropriate for a 5-year-old to witness. But nothing was conventional anymore. They had formed a family in a matter of hours, based on mutual need and genuine affection, and families face crises together. "Then let's get ready," Mary said practically. "I'll grab my purse and make sure I have all the emergency numbers." She turned to Rose. You should come too." As they prepared to leave, Isabella fetched her doll, Clara, and a small drawing she had made during the week, folded carefully in her little backpack. "Uncle James," she said, offering the paper, "I made this for you. It's our new family." The drawing showed 4 figures holding hands. A tall woman, clearly Mary, a shorter, curly-haired woman, Rose, a small girl, Isabella, and a tall man in a suit, smiling broadly. "You're smiling in the drawing," she explained, "because now you're not alone anymore." James took the drawing with trembling hands, noting each detail made with colored pencils. It was the first artwork he had received in decades, and ironically, it was far more valuable than any expensive painting on his walls. "It's the most beautiful gift I've ever received, Isabella. I'll keep it with me always." He folded the paper carefully and slipped it into the inside pocket of his suit jacket, close to his failing heart. "Now, whenever I'm afraid, I'll look at this and remember I have a family who cares about me." The trip to Dr. Moore's office was in James's BMW, with Mary up front and Rose and Isabella in the back. The girl watched the city through the window with curiosity, occasionally making comments that eased the tension. "Look at all the cars," she exclaimed as they drove along Fifth Avenue. "Everybody's going somewhere important." "We're all going to the most important place right now," James replied, glancing in the rear view at the family he had gained in hours. "We're going to take care of my health so I can spend more time with you." The doctor's office was in a modern building in Midtown East, with spacious rooms and sophisticated decor that tried to mask the weight of the difficult news delivered there every day. The receptionist, a middle-aged woman used to last-minute emergencies, looked visibly surprised to see James arrive with 3 companions, including a small child holding a cloth doll. "Mr. Santana," she said politely, "the doctor is expecting you, but your companions will need to wait in the lobby." "No," James replied firmly. "They're my family, and they're coming in with me. If necessary, I'll pay for additional appointments, but I won't face this alone." Dr. Henry Moore, with graying hair and gentle manners that inspired immediate trust. When he saw James enter with 3 women and a child, surprise flickered across his face, followed by something like relief. "James," he said, greeting each companion politely, "I'm glad to see you're not facing this alone." He bent to address Isabella. "And you must be someone very special to be here taking care of James." "I'm Isabella," she replied solemnly, "and I brought my doll Clara to keep him company." "She's very good with sick people." The doctor smiled, genuinely. "Good, Isabella. Sick people really do need special company." Then he turned to James, his tone more serious. "Let's get right to it. The tests confirm very advanced dilated cardiomyopathy. Your heart is functioning at only 20% of normal capacity." Mary automatically took James's hand, while Rose pulled Isabella closer to shield her from the heavier details. But the girl remained attentive, absorbing every word with sober focus. "What are the treatment options?" Mary asked, surprising the doctor by taking the lead. "Pardon me, doctor, but we're his family now and we need to understand everything." Dr. Moore nodded respectfully. "Options are limited. Medication to alleviate symptoms and buy some time, or a heart transplant, which is our only real chance." He paused. "The problem is that James needs to get on the transplant list immediately, and even then, considering his age and current condition, the odds are around 30%. 30% is better than 0, Isabella announced, making everyone look at her. "At school, when I got 3 out of 10 sums right, my teacher said it was better than not getting any. So let's try the 30%. Her child logic, applied to a life or death situation, cut through the despair settling over the room with refreshing clarity. "The child is right," Dr. Moore said with an admiring smile. 30% is a real chance, and I've seen miracles on less. Rose, who had been quiet through the medical explanation, finally asked, "Doctor, how much time would he have without the transplant?" The question everyone feared came from the person who least knew James, but who already loved him like family. With medication and proper care, maybe 6 months. Without treatment, much less. The silence that followed was deafening, heavy with the weight of a temporal sentence hanging over them like a sword. 6 months is a lot of time, Isabella said thoughtfully, breaking the silence with her particular wisdom. It's enough time for me to teach you about fish, to tell lots of stories, to drink lots of chamomile tea, and for you to teach me grown-up things. She looked at James with determination. And if a new heart shows up before the 6 months, then we have even more time to be together. Her ability to find hope in the middle of despair touched everyone present, including the experienced physician who had delivered thousands of hard diagnoses in his career. James turned to Isabella again, taking her small hands in his. "You're right, my dear. 6 months can be a long time if we use each day well. And who knows, maybe a compatible heart will show up, and I'll be with you much longer." He looked to Mary and Rose. "Will you really face this with me?" "It won't be easy. I'll need a lot of care. I'll have bad days. I'll be a burden." "Every family is a burden to each other sometimes," Mary replied simply. "That's what family is for." Dr. Moore watched with both professional and personal interest. "James, may I say something? In 15 years of treating you, I've never heard you this relaxed and hopeful. Whatever happened to make you a family, it's doing wonders for your emotional health, and that counts a lot in treatment." He turned to the women. "Are you willing to learn about cardiac care? I need to teach you about medication, warning signs, and emergencies." "Of course," Rose said immediately. "If we're going to care for him right, we need to know everything." Mary nodded vigorously. "I took care of my diabetic mother for 5 years. I learn fast." Isabella raised her little hand. "Can I learn too? I can help remind him to take his medicine and do the exercises the doctor says." Her determination drew smiles from everyone, easing the heaviness for a moment. Dr. Moore spent the next hour explaining in detail the treatment, medications, necessary care, and the emergency signs they should watch for. Mary wrote everything in a small notebook from her purse, while Rose asked practical questions about routines and meals. Isabella held Clara in her lap, occasionally whispering in the doll's ear, as if translating the medical information into doll language. When they left 2 hours later, they carried a folder full of information, prescriptions, and a new perspective on the time they had together. "What now?" James asked as they got into the car, looking at the 3 people who had transformed the worst day of his life into a discovery of love and family. "Now we go home and make that special dinner I promised," Rose replied. "And tomorrow we begin our new life as a real family." From the back seat, Isabella hugged her doll and declared with absolute conviction, "And we'll hope very hard for a new heart to show up soon, because our family still has lots to do together." No sooner had she finished than someone opened the door with purpose. It was Paul, James's driver, who had arrived at the building out of old habit to pick up his boss after medical appointments. Surprise flashed across his face when he saw James emerge with 3 companions, including a small child holding a cloth doll. "Mr. Santana," he said, approaching with precise steps, "I received your message to come get you, but I didn't know you would have companions." Paul had worked for James for 8 years, always keeping the strict professional distance his boss demanded. But something in the man's expression intrigued him. A new softness, a genuine humanity he had never seen in all those years. "Paul, I want to introduce my family. James said, with a naturalness that made the driver blink several times to ensure he'd heard the impossible words correctly. "This is Mary Constance, whom you've known for years, Rose, and her daughter, Isabella. As of today, they're the most important people in my life." The declaration was so far outside the known pattern that Paul was momentarily speechless. The man he knew had no family, no close friends, no one beyond employees and strategic contacts. "A pleasure to meet you," he managed at last, his impeccable professionalism overcoming his shock. "Isabella," James said, thoughtfully. On the way back through Manhattan's busy streets, his business mind shifting to practical solutions, "I was thinking about something important. Would you two like to move in permanently with me? The apartment is big enough for all of us with rooms to spare. The bedrooms are lovely and comfortable, and we could be together all the time, especially now that I'll need special care." The proposal dropped like a silent, emotional bomb. Rose, who had been following in respectful silence, felt her heart race. Moving into the millionaire's penthouse was completely outside her known reality, something she had never imagined could be part of her life. Yet the absolute sincerity in James's voice was undeniable and moving. "Mr. Santana," she said carefully, measuring each word, "that wouldn't be appropriate. We have our little place, our dear neighbors, our whole life there." "But Mommy," Isabella cut in with irrefutable logic, "if Uncle James is sick in his heart, he needs us really close to take good care of him. And there's that beautiful aquarium and a big room where I can play and draw." Mary, who knew James's deep loneliness better than anyone, gently joined the conversation. "Rose, perhaps we could try this move at least for a while, until Mr. Santana is fully stabilized on the treatment." She looked at James in the mirror. "The apartment has more than enough rooms, and it would be infinitely more practical to care for him the way he deserves." When they finally arrived at the Upper East Side penthouse, the place felt completely different from the morning. The sanctuary of cold, self-imposed solitude now pulsed with real life, true love, and the infinite possibility of family happiness. Paul helped carry the bags and the medications the doctor had prescribed. Before heading home, he did something that surprised everyone. He addressed Isabella directly with genuine respect. "Young lady, it was a real pleasure to meet you today. I truly hope to see you many, many times from now on." Inside the spacious living room, Isabella ran straight to the giant aquarium, followed by James, who walked more slowly, already feeling the clear effects of the intense emotional day. "The fish are extra happy today," she announced with absolute conviction, watching the colorful animals swim gracefully among the corals. "I think they know there are a lot more special people to visit and talk to them every day now." Mary and Rose headed automatically to the wide kitchen to begin the promised special dinner, but were immediately interrupted by James. "No," he said with surprising firmness. "Today is definitely not a day for you to work for me. Let's order delicious food from a great restaurant. Or better yet, let's cook together like a real family. I'm desperate to learn to do something useful in my ridiculously expensive kitchen." The idea of James Santana, multimillionaire businessman, cooking with his own hands was so absurd that it made all three laugh aloud. "Do you know how to do even one basic thing in the kitchen?" Mary asked, genuinely amused. "I can make espresso," he answered with mock-wounded dignity, making Isabella giggle. "And I can heat a lot of things in the microwave quite competently." "That's not real cooking," Isabella decreed with absolute culinary authority. "Real cooking is when you take all the separate things and mix them with care so they get tasty and smell good. Mommy taught me that. Then today, you and your wise mother will teach me too," James said humbly. "What's the easiest, most delicious dish for a complete beginner?" Rose thought carefully, assessing James's non-existent skills. How about simple pasta with homemade tomato sauce? It's almost impossible to mess up too badly, and Isabella can help with the easiest, safest tasks. The apartment's kitchen, rarely used for anything more ambitious than reheating the best takeout in Manhattan, suddenly became a lively, improvised family cooking school. James, still in his expensive Italian suit, was given a clean apron Mary found in a drawer that hadn't been opened in years. First, we put plenty of water to boil in a big pot, Rose explained with maternal patience, as if teaching a small child. While the water heats, we make the sauce from real tomatoes. Isabella was officially assigned to wash every tomato carefully in the wide sink, a task she executed with maximum seriousness and focus, inspecting each tomato as if she were a professional quality control specialist. "This one is perfect and smooth, Mommy," she announced proudly, placing each approved tomato in a clean bowl. "This other one is just ripe enough to make delicious sauce." James discovered quickly that chopping a simple onion was infinitely more challenging than managing a complex multi-million-dollar company with hundreds of employees. "Not like that, Mr. Santana," Mary laughed, coming close to guide his inexpert hands with gentle care. "The onion isn't going to run off the cutting board. Cut very slowly, and be careful not to nick yourself. It's burning my eyes so much," he complained sincerely, making Isabella laugh with delight. "Totally normal, Uncle James. Onions always make everyone cry a little, but it isn't real sadness. It's just sting that goes away quick." As they cooked together in warm harmony, they chatted naturally about simple, everyday things James had never experienced in his isolated life. Rose told enchanting stories about her poor but happy childhood in Mississippi, where she'd learned her kitchen secrets from a wise grandmother who could turn simple ingredients into delicious meals. Mary shared family recipes she had guarded for years without anyone to share them with. Isabella chatted about culinary adventures with her mom in their small apartment on the outskirts of the city. "Once we tried to make a birthday cake without a proper pan," she said with contagious enthusiasm. "We used a big regular pot, and it ended up looking like a clown's hat, but it still tasted good, and we laughed a lot." The touching description of true family intimacy made James realize, with painful clarity, how much he had consciously given up by choosing isolation among impersonal luxury. Dinner was finally ready after nearly 3 hours of cheerful joint effort, punctuated by genuine laughter, tiny kitchen disasters, and valuable shared learning. The pasta was slightly sticky from inexperience, the sauce a bit saltier than ideal, but to James, it was honestly the most delicious and meaningful meal he'd had in years. "It's absolutely perfect," he declared emphatically, making sure to savor every forkful with genuine pleasure and visible gratitude. "Infinitely better than any fancy dish from any expensive restaurant where I've eaten alone." "That's because it was made with a lot of real love," Isabella explained with natural moving wisdom. "Food made with real love is always tastier and more special. Mommy taught me that when I was little." After dinner, they settled comfortably in the main room, where Isabella convinced James to sit on the floor beside the giant aquarium to watch the fish in companionable silence. "They have totally different personalities," she explained patiently, pointing to each one with impressive knowledge. "That big golden one is shy and introverted. He always hides behind the largest coral. And that little striped one is super curious and social. He always comes to check things out when there are new people." James watched the tropical fish with completely new eyes, seeing them as living beings with unique behaviors, not just expensive decor for rare visitors. Mary brought more aromatic chamomile in pretty cups, and they spent the rest of the evening calmly discussing specific plans for the coming days. "Tomorrow I need to go to the bank to handle some financial matters," James said, thoughtful, and I want to speak urgently with my attorneys about some fundamental changes I need to make. What kind of changes? Mary asked, naturally curious. Very important things, he answered, mysteriously, but with a smile that suggested good surprises. Things I should have done long ago, but never had the courage or the reason. Rose and Isabella exchanged curious but respectful glances, trusting he would share details when he felt it was right. Uncle James, Isabella said, stifling a graceful yawn, can I sleep here tonight so I can start taking care of you right away, like real family does? Of course, my dear, he said with warmth. Mary can show you two the most comfortable bedrooms. I want you to feel completely at home here. So tomorrow morning can we set up my new room, just the way I like best? She asked hopefully, brown eyes shining. We can set it up exactly the way you want and dream, James promised. And we'll also go get all your important things from your other apartment. Anything special to you has a guaranteed place here. What's most important to me is already here in this room, she said, with moving wisdom, looking lovingly at her mom, at Mary, and at him. Now we just need to get clothes, toys, and the drawings I made to decorate my new room. Before he could process it, a hand grasped his arm. Rose, who had suddenly risen from her chair. Tears shone in her eyes, and her voice trembled. Mr. Santana, I need to tell you something very important before it's too late. James looked at her with genuine surprise, noticing for the first time the deep intensity radiating from the woman who had remained relatively reserved through the family conversations. What is it, Rose? Are you all right? Mary and Isabella stopped immediately, sensing something significant was about to be revealed. I can't pretend this is normal anymore, Rose said, the words rushing out as if she had held them too long. I can't accept all this extraordinary generosity without you knowing the whole truth about me, about who we really are. She pulled Isabella close, her hands protective on the little shoulders. Mr. Santana, I partially lied in my job interview. Not completely, but I left out important things that might have made you refuse to hire me. James frowned, though more in curiosity than worry or irritation. What kind of things, Rose? The question came gentle and encouraging, without a trace of the intimidating corporate chill he usually projected in tense situations. Rose drew a deep breath, gathering courage for the confession she had rehearsed in her mind for weeks. I fled Mississippi years ago because Isabella's father beat me violently. Her voice cracked, but she pushed on with impressive resolve. He drank every day, and when he drank, he became uncontrollable. One night he beat me so brutally I couldn't get out of bed for 3 days. The silence grew heavy with the weight of that devastating revelation. Isabella was just a few months old, crying constantly from hunger, and I couldn't even nurse her because of the broken ribs and swollen face. The mental picture hit James like another gut punch. That terrible night I decided I would never let my innocent daughter grow up watching her mother being beaten. I gathered the little money I had hidden in food jars, grabbed Isabella from the crib, and fled to New York on the first bus out before dawn. She wiped at the tears now escaping. I left everything behind. Furniture I'd bought with so much effort, clothes, family photos, everything. I brought only a small suitcase with diapers and baby clothes. Rose, James began, voice thick, but she stopped him with a firm gesture. I'm not done, Mr. Santana. There's more I need to say. She looked at Isabella, who listened with big, serious eyes, absorbing things a 5-year-old shouldn't need to process. When we got to New York, we didn't know a soul. I slept at the Port Authority bus terminal with Isabella in my arms for almost a whole week until I got a job at a cheap diner downtown. The memory made her voice shake again. The owner, Mr. Armando, let me sleep in a small, dirty storage room with her in exchange for working 16 hours a day, cleaning, serving, cooking. Mary stepped forward instinctively, laying a caring hand on Rose's shoulder in silent support. After that, I lived in cheap, dirty rooming houses. I shared a small room with 3 strangers. I cleaned 5 different houses at the same time just to pay rent and buy Isabella's formula. The tears flowed more freely. There were times we ate only 1 meal a day to save subway fare. There were weeks I had to choose between diapers and food. The brutality of the reality echoed like a confession. Isabella grew up watching me fight to survive, seeing daily difficulties, but I always tried to protect her from how desperate things really were sometimes. Isabella slipped from her mother's arm and walked to James with determined steps. "Mommy always took very good care of me," she said, with fierce, unshakable loyalty. Even when there wasn't much money for things, there was always a warm hug and a beautiful bedtime story. Her simple words cut through the heavy tension like a soft, powerful light. And she always said, one day our life would get better, that good people would show up to help us. James's heart clenched painfully as he realized such a small child had witnessed and understood so much hardship. "But that doesn't explain why you call it a lie, Rose," he said gently, crouching to be at Isabella's height while speaking. "You survived something absolutely terrible. You protected your baby with tooth and nail and built a new life with your own hands. That's extraordinary courage, not dishonesty." Rose shook her head. "I didn't tell everything in the interview. I didn't talk about the violence, or about fleeing like a criminal, or about trustworthy references, because I always worked off the books to avoid being found." She paused, heavy and pained. "And there's one more thing. The real reason I needed to bring Isabella to work isn't just because our daycare closed for lack of funds." James waited patiently, his expression encouraging her to continue, clearly seeing there was more trauma to share. "The deeper truth is that I'm terrified to leave her with anyone, even for a few hours. I'm afraid her father will find out where we live and try to take her away." The confession came out as a whisper, laden with years of justified paranoia and constant terror. "I'm afraid someone will hurt her the way he hurt me. I'm afraid she'll disappear from my life, and I'll never find her again. That's why I always take her with me everywhere. That's why I never accept neighborly offers to babysit. That's why I get nervous and suspicious when people ask about our life or past." Mary sank into the nearest chair, clearly moved and shaken by Rose's story of desperate struggle. "Rose, my dear, you were incredibly brave to tell us all this." Her voice brimmed with genuine admiration. "It can't have been easy to relive such painful memories." James stood slowly, his business mind already working practical solutions to protect his new family from any threat. "Is he still actively looking for you?" he asked, with professional gravity. "Do you have any idea where he is now?" "I don't know," Rose answered honestly, still trembling. "For the first 2 years after I ran, I had terrible nightmares every night that he would suddenly show up and drag me back to hell." She ran a hand through her hair. "I moved 3 different times, just in case. Changed jobs whenever anyone started asking personal questions. I avoided going out at night or to crowded places." The description of a life lived in constant alert made James's heart ache. "But for the last 2 years I've had no direct news of him. Maybe he gave up. Maybe he found another woman to control and hurt." Her voice carried deep, justified bitterness. "But the fear never fully left. That's why I work so much and stash money in different places. I always have a detailed plan to disappear again if I need to." Isabella, who had been quiet through her mother's traumatic account, finally spoke with her moving little wisdom. "Mommy, you don't need to be afraid of bad things anymore. Now we have Uncle James and Miss Mary to protect us from everything. She looked at James with absolute, unshakable trust. Bad people can't hurt us when good, strong people are taking care of us. Isn't that true? The innocent question settled on James like a tremendous responsibility, but also sparked an iron determination. It's true, Isabella. And I promise that I will never let anyone hurt either of you. He looked straight into Rose's red, tear-swollen eyes. You and Isabella are completely safe now, completely protected. Mr. Santana, Rose said, still bravely fighting the tears, now that you know the full, ugly truth about us, our messy, dangerous life, if you want us to leave right away, I understand. I know we're not the kind of complication a man of your position should have. We're a risk, a problem. James stepped forward decisively, set both hands on her shoulders with firmness. Rose, look at me. When she lifted her red, puffy eyes, he continued, voice steady and full of feeling. You are exactly the kind of courageous person I want in my family. A mother who protects her child above everything. A woman who fights to survive against all odds. Someone who knows the true value of what matters in life. If that violent man ever has the nerve to show up here, he'll have to go through me first. The fierce declaration even surprised him with the intensity of protective emotion burning in his chest. Besides, he added, trying to ease the heaviness, I have very expensive, very competent lawyers, and highly trained, efficient security staff. I believe we can resolve any problem that comes our way. Mary finally spoke with the wisdom of someone who had seen much suffering. Rose, my dear, every woman who suffered under a violent, controlling man understands your pain and constant fear. She stepped in and hugged Rose warmly, conveying strength and female solidarity. You did exactly what you had to do to protect your precious daughter. There is nothing wrong, nothing shameful about that. She squeezed tighter. And now you have a complete family to help heal old wounds and build a safe future. Not wanting to be left out of the powerful moment, Isabella joined the embrace, turning it into a group hug that even included James, who found himself in the middle of a bundle of genuine affection and mutual protection. I'll speak personally with the head of my security. He's a former FBI agent, very capable and experienced. He'll know exactly how to protect us without interfering with normal life. I don't want our life to become a gilded prison, Rose said, deeply maternal. Isabella needs a completely normal childhood, to play freely, to go to school, to make friends. And she'll have all of that, James promised with absolute conviction. She'll simply have discreet professional protection to ensure you both sleep peacefully every night. He crouched to Isabella's height. You won't even notice they're around, sweetheart. They're very good at what they do. Cool, she exclaimed with childish enthusiasm. Like invisible superheroes who protect good people. The rest of the night passed with significantly lighter conversation, though the weight of Rose's courageous revelation had forged an even deeper intimacy among them. They were now not only a family chosen by circumstance, but a family that knew one another's deepest secrets and oldest pains. When it was finally time to sleep, well past midnight, James personally accompanied Rose and Isabella to their rooms, making sure they had everything for a comfortable night. Rose, he said at her door, his voice full of sincere gratitude, thank you for trusting me with your most painful story. I know it wasn't easy. Thank you for not sending us away after you learned the whole truth, she replied simply, but her words carried profound relief. For the first time in 6 whole years, I feel truly safe. In the next room, Isabella was comfortably tucked in with Clara, hugged to her chest, still wide awake despite the late hour. Uncle James, she called when he approached to say goodnight, are you going to be sick for a really long time? The direct question forced him to confront the reality of his condition. I don't know for sure, Isabella. The doctors are trying very hard to help me get better quickly. If you get too sick to take care of us, we'll take care of you, with lots of love, she declared with absolute determination. That's how family is. When one is weak and needs help, the others get strong for them. The child's natural wisdom touched James more deeply than any adult's words could. You're absolutely right, and you know something important, he said, sitting on the edge of her bed. Even if I get very sick, you will always have a safe home here. He smoothed the blanket over Isabella's small shoulders, then stood quietly in the doorway, long enough to hear the soft, even breath that meant she had drifted off with Clara tucked beneath her chin. When he turned back into the hall, Rose was waiting, eyes still red but steady. Thank you for tonight, she said. He shook his head. Thank you for telling me the truth. He hesitated. Tomorrow I'm calling my lawyers. We're going to make things formal. If anything happens to me, you and Isabella stay here. No questions, no conditions. I should have said it sooner. James, she whispered, surprised by the use of his first name. That's too much. It isn't, he answered simply. It's what family does. By 9 a.m. the next morning, his conference table was covered with folders instead of quarterly reports. The estate lawyer reviewed documents in a precise, unfussy tone, a living trust that transferred the penthouse to a small foundation with lifelong residence rights for Rose and Isabella, a scholarship fund in perpetuity for Isabella, a bequest to Mary, a clause that set aside a substantial amount for a program supporting women fleeing domestic violence. Name? The lawyer asked, pen poised. James looked at the drawing in his pocket. Call it the Helen and Clara Fund, he said, for my mother and a very good doll. Security arrived that afternoon. A former agent with an easy manner walked the halls with Mary, asking where cameras should be placed so they wouldn't feel watched. We'll keep a low profile, he promised. We'll also file for an order of protection in case the father resurfaces. It was handled within a week, paperwork tucked into a file in the hall, console like any other household document. Not a cage, just a key in the right hand if a door ever needed locking. At Santana and Associates, the change came with the bluntness of a signed order and the awkwardness of a first apology. James stood in the auditorium before rows of employees who had perfected the art of not meeting his eye. Beside him, Charles Allen clutched a binder as if it were a life jacket. I've run this place like silence was a virtue, James began. It isn't. From today, no one gets fired for saying good morning. A nervous ripple of laughter. He held up a hand. I'm serious. We'll fund on-site childcare during school breaks. We'll match donations to shelters and legal clinics. And I'll start weekly open office hours. If I forget how to listen, remind me. No one clapped. Then, from the third row, an assistant came to her feet and started, timidly. Others followed. He didn't smile. He wasn't a man who smiled easily, but he breathed, and breathing felt like permission. Days took on a different architecture. Medications lined up in a neat tray on the kitchen counter. Isabella made a small chart with stars that said, pills o'clock, and taped it to the fridge with Scotch tape. Mary pretended not to mind on the stainless steel. Short walks replaced late-night emails. He learned what fatigue felt like when you admitted it to people who didn't judge you for needing to sit. Rose cooked simple food he could keep down on bad days and rich meals on good ones. At night, if he had breath for it, he told Isabella stories about small businesses and big mistakes in the language of fairy tales, a city where all the stores forgot how to greet their customers, until a girl with a cloth doll reminded them that kindness increased profits. There were setbacks. One morning, he woke on the terrace couch, sweating and dizzy, the skyline wavering. Mary called 911 without drama. In the ER, Dr. Moore's voice went gentle and fierce at once. "No more pretending," he said. They adjusted the drugs. A nurse fit him for a wearable defibrillator that hummed like a quiet bodyguard under his shirt. "This is insurance," Dr. Moore said. "Real insurance." The transplant team listed him. The call could come in a week, or not at all. They said it with practice and compassion. He said, "Understood," and meant it, and then went home and watched fish. In late August, something else turned. Security phoned from downstairs. A man from Mississippi had made inquiries in the neighborhood. He didn't reach the building. A lawyer filed the proper motion, marshals served papers, and the phone calls stopped. Rose slept through the night for the first time in years. When she woke, her eyes were puffy from rest, not crying. "I didn't know sleep could feel like this," she told Mary over coffee. James said nothing, but a spot behind his ribs, left of the ache, loosened. On a Tuesday in September, Isabella marched into his study with a serious face and a plastic stethoscope. "Check up," she announced. She placed the round blue disc over his shirt and pressed her ear to the other end. "Your heart sounds like a drum that's tired," she reported solemnly, but still trying. "I've been accused of worse," he said, and she giggled and scribbled "trying" on a notepad, as if writing a prescription. He kept his promise at the office. He brought in chairs to the glass-walled room that had always functioned as a watchtower. He started asking questions he didn't already know the answers to. Once, in a meeting, he caught himself about to say, "Next topic," and stopped. "Tell me where you disagree," he asked Charles. The CFO blinked, then spoke, hands unclenching as he did. It was clumsy for a while, then less so. The call came on a cold, clear night in early November, long after the city's noise had settled into a winter murmur. James had just finished reading a story to Isabella about a kind dragon who guarded a bridge no one crossed anymore because they were afraid of its shadow. The phone rattled the nightstand. Unknown number, local hospital exchange. He breathed once, twice, and answered. "Mr. Santana," a calm voice said, "we have a potential match." The apartment woke in layers, lamplight, then voices, then the soft military precision of movement under pressure. Mary laid out clothes and a small overnight bag. Rose tucked the drawing back into his jacket pocket and folded his fingers over it. Isabella, hair a wild halo from sleep, pulled something from her backpack, a narrow ribbon once tied around a doll dress. "For luck," she told him, tying it carefully around his wrist. "Don't lose it." In pre-op, the room was too bright and too clean. Dr. Moore stood at the foot of the bed, mask down, eyes visible. "The heart is good," he said. "A young donor. Blood type match, size match. It's as strong a chance as we get." He lowered his voice. "It will still be a long surgery. There are risks on the table, and after he didn't list them, they all knew." James nodded. He didn't say brave things. He squeezed Mary's hand, then Rose's, then held Isabella's small fingers as if they were a rail on a dark stair. "Will you come back?" she asked, no tremor in the question, only expectation. "I'll try," he said. "I promise I'll try as hard as I can." He went under with the ribbon on his wrist and the drawing against his chest, paper and thread and ink and belief. The hours in the waiting room were elastic, time stretching and snapping back. Mary prayed in a whisper only she, and perhaps someone else, could hear. Rose read the same paragraph of a paperwork packet 12 times and remembered none of it. Isabella slept with her head in Rose's lap, then woke and asked if fish slept with their eyes open. "Some do," Mary said, and they decided that was a good sign for everyone. Just before dawn, a door opened. Dr. Moore appeared with the gait of a man who has been standing all night and the face of one who is carefully managing hope. He pulled the mask down. "We're not out of the woods," he said, "but the surgery went well. The new heart is beating on its own." Mary cried without making a sound. Rose exhaled a breath that seemed to have been lodged in her since the call. Isabella did a small, solemn nod, as if ticking a box on a list only she could see. "Next thing," she said softly, more to herself than to the adults, "medicine and resting." The ICU days were both fragile and stubborn. Tubes, beeps, protocols. James floated near the surface, then closer. The first time he opened his eyes, Mary was there with water he couldn't yet drink. The second time, Rose was there with a quiet smile that changed the lines of her face. The third time, Isabella was there in a tiny disposable gown, mask on, hair tucked under a paper cap, her eyes enormous above the fabric. She lifted the ribbon he still wore and tapped it. "It worked," she whispered. He managed a blink that felt like yes. Rehab turned him into a student again. He learned to walk farther than the day before. He learned that gratitude could ache more sharply than regret. He learned the names of medications that would follow him for the rest of his life and the discipline they required. He accepted, for the first time, that accepting help was a skill you practiced. He went home on a grey afternoon with the skyline washed clean by rain. The aquarium glowed like a patient star. Paul carried in a vase of flowers from the office, not expensive orchids, but a mixed bunch with a handwritten note, signed by names he had never bothered to learn, and now read twice. In the kitchen, on the fridge, Pill's o'clock had been updated with new times and new stars. Winter eased into a raw, windy March. His hair grew back where they'd shaved it. His voice lost the sandpaper and found a warm rasp. He wore a mask in crowded places and a hat in the cold. He sat for shorter hours at the office and longer ones at home. The on-site childcare opened with a ribbon Isabella was invited to cut. "To make it easier for moms and dads," she announced to the small crowd, as if it had always been obvious. One evening, when the light on the terrace went the color of honey, and the air smelled faintly of thawing earth, Isabella climbed into his lap with the plastic stethoscope. "Check up," she said, as always. She pressed the disc to his chest and listened with full concentration. He watched her face change, a small miracle playing out across features he knew as well as his own reflection. "How does it sound?" he asked. She lifted her head, eyes shining. "Louder," she said. "Not tired. Like when the fish get excited and swim faster when we come to look." He laughed, and the laugh didn't scrape. Rose, drying dishes by the sink, looked over and shook her head at the sound, as if tucking it away where she kept the precious things. Mary set a teapot on the table without fanfare. "Chamomile?" she asked, out of habit and history. "Always," he said. They drank tea at the same low table where he had once sat in a suit and learned his life had an expiration date. The cups were the same. The hands around them were steadier. Later, when the city's lights pricked on and the aquarium hummed its soft mechanical lullaby, James walked the hall where a 5-year-old had once reached up and wiped his tears. The marble was cool under his bare feet. He stopped at the wall where the drawing now hung in a modest frame, not far from art worth more than some houses. 4 figures, hand in hand. The tall man in a suit still smiled the impossible smile. He touched the glass lightly with the tips of his fingers, and felt, under the new rhythm in his chest, something older. Like a key turning, he had not conquered anything grand. He had not solved mortality. He had at last chosen how to spend the time he'd been given, and with whom. When he went back to the living room, Isabella was already drowsing, Clara tucked under her arm, Rose folding a blanket, Mary clicking off a lamp. "Tomorrow," Isabella mumbled, "we have to teach the clownfish a new trick." Her eyes fluttered open for one last check. "You'll be here, right?" "I'll be here," he said, not as a vow to the universe, but as a promise he could finally keep. On a Thursday afternoon, months earlier, chamomile had been poured and something in him had opened. On a quiet spring night, with a second heart learning its home, the Emperor of Silence became, without ceremony, a man whose wealth could finally be counted in chairs pulled closer, cups refilled, and a small hand that knew where to find his pulse. The end. Thank you all for watching. This is Mr. Hope, and I adore you all.